Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers here at the Green Film Festival of San Francisco. You've just seen the really wonderful film, Water for Life, and we're lucky enough to have the director, Will Parnello, here. Welcome, Will.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone out there for watching the film. Nice to be here with you.
Most definitely. And, we, share lots of different kind of films from around the world, and occasionally a little serendipity plays in there. And we're lucky enough that, a lot of the filmmaking team involved with the film, including Will, are here based in the Bay Area. So it's always neat to kind of celebrate Bay Area voices, especially when they go off abroad and kind of capture important stories like this. Um, so, Will, maybe a good place to start is what was the catalyst for kind of going down this rabbit hole and knowing that this was kind of the story you wanted to tell?
So Vicente Franco, who's the director of photography on the film, Academy Award nominated filmmaker in his own right, and I were hired to make a film about Francisco Pineda. And Francisco Pineda is a subsistence farmer from El Salvador. You saw him in the film. And when he received the Goldman Prize in 2010, and we were hired to make a short 5-minute film about his achievements stopping gold mining. And when we were flying home, we said it was the 23rd of December, 2010, and we just said we have to make a film about this guy. The natural arc of his story, that he started this anti-mining movement and within 1 year gained this national popularity, and the media picked up on the story because it was the year of a presidential election. 85% of the people were against mining. Mining was banned by the sitting conservative pro-mining president, but he saw that he was going out of office. The incoming candidate from his party was probably going to lose the election because of this issue. So he banned mining. And within a year, three of Francisco's associates were assassinated, and this U.S. mining corporation sued the government of El Salvador in the World Bank court for $350 million. So it was this incredibly dynamic story, and all of this story arc happened in 1 year. However, 5 years later, we raised money early on. National Geographic was our first funder. We raised money early on fairly easily, but 5 years later, El Salvador was no longer of interest geopolitically to people in the United States, funders, programmers, and so forth. No one was interested. Everyone was basically saying, great story, really incredible, but the funding stopped. So my filmmaking partner, John Antonelli, who was an advisor on the film, he didn't actually work on the film, who was able to have the pullback from the Earth view, because I was myopically focused on the details, said, you need to put together two other stories. If you show three stories in Latin America of these multinational corporations exploiting the people for their resources, indigenous people who have rights to their land and rights to the resources on their land, you show these patterns of exploitation and impunity because there are death threats and murder happening in all of these countries. It's a microcosm for what's happening globally, Africa, Asia, the Pacific Islands, and even in North America now. And when he said that, it was like the epiphany, like, why didn't I think about that? And he said, well, that's why you have a partner sometimes, you help balance each other and keep an eye on the prize. And, it's never, as you know, it's never easy to raise money for a film, but suddenly there was a turnaround and funders were very interested in the film. And so it was like an incredible change. Um, yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but yeah.
Well, it's definitely well. And so, how did you decide the kind of your kind of triptych of heroes, activists, heroines that you're kind of following? How did you choose them, and also what were some of the kind of biggest challenges that you faced on the ground to capture these stories when obviously the powers that be are not happy about what's going on?
Well, we chose people who had had a victory already in their struggle to protect their land and their water and their indigenous ways of life. But they also had a fight, a continued fight, because we wanted to show that these battles really never end. You fight to protect a river. For example, Berta Cáceres stopped a hydroelectric project, but the hydroelectric industry still wants to put a hydroelectric dam on that river. And they never really stop. They wait maybe for political change, right? Change within an administration, a presidential change from liberal to conservative. So we wanted to have an ongoing fight so that we could show that this sort of work really never ends. I mean, this is a way of life for people. And so that's how we chose them. And, you know, they had to be obviously compelling storytellers. And it was important that we could find folks whose families we could connect with, because these figures are kind of iconic, and we didn't want them to be like the stereotypical activist with a bullhorn, which it's hard for people to connect with someone who is just this figurehead that's always there shouting down the opposition. We wanted to show someone's life in full. And so it was important that we could connect with their families so that we could show the impact of the work on the families, the need for the family support of the activists, but also the struggle and the pain of the family, because that's what made the story human. And to go from the iconic activist who's succeeding and it's just hero worship to showing someone who really has given a lot to try to defend and protect the earth for all of us. I mean, for themselves, but really for everyone.
And how do you,
Go ahead,
oh,
sorry.
go
No,
ahead,
that's
I'll
okay.
ask you now.
You had asked about the struggles we faced. I mean, the struggles were many, you know, I mean, in part establishing those relationships, right? It takes years, and you have to keep showing up. And we often didn't have the money to keep showing up, so we had to keep the relationship going. I mean, luckily, you know, pre-Zoom there and FaceTime, there was Skype. And when Skype first came into being, it gave us a huge leg up because we were able to keep talking. And it was important because email doesn't convey anything. You need to be looking in. I mean, yes, you can convey a lot, but until you really have a depth of a relationship, you have to be looking each other in the eye to build trust and to explain what's going on. Like, why is this taking so long? Because it's difficult to raise the money. Because we have to do other work in order to sustain ourselves and those kinds of things. So, I mean, there was that. And then there were just the threats that our protagonist faced and that we faced with them. And so there's a scene in the film where Berta Cáceres's life is being threatened by people in a community downstream, down the mountain from her community, who are in favor of the hydroelectric project and the mining that it would bring, because they see there's economic opportunities that will benefit their community. And so there were threats to her life, and we had to navigate the waters of how do we protect her? Can we protect her? Is that presumptuous to think we can protect her? And how do we protect ourselves? And navigating those waters, it was perhaps the most challenging diplomatic challenge I've ever had to face in my life, to be honest. And I don't know if we have time to tell that entire story right now, but we succeeded. I mean, inevitably, I was able to get through on a satellite phone to someone at Congresswoman Pelosi's office in San Francisco, convince her of the gravity of the situation we were in. I had to have a sense of urgency, but not be shrill or not come off like a crazy, because I needed to get their attention, but not seem like I was hysterical, which is a really fine line. But I threaded the needle, because what happened was someone from Pelosi's office, in fact, called the U.S. Embassy in Tegucigalpa, and they called the National Police, and the National Police came to that community where we knew we were going to have trouble. And if they hadn't been there, there would have been trouble guaranteed. And we ourselves could not call the National Police because they were Berta's arch enemy. They had planted weapons in her vehicle to arrest her and accuse her of terrorism. They had planted drugs in her vehicle to accuse her of being, you know, a recalcitrant and arrest her under all these false charges. And so if we called them for help, it was going to be compromising her. But if an outside force did that, we as Americans were needing help. How are we going to protect ourselves? So that's what happened. We got through it. And you know, Berta's family and supporters would say that she lived for a year longer than she might otherwise have lived as a result of the Goldman Prize, as a result of us making the film, as a result of what happened that day. I mean, who knows, right? Who knows? It's all conjecture. I don't know that I believe we saved her life, but I think, you know, the focus of the Goldman Prize and that international attention, you know, saved her life for another year. But, you know, it just goes to show the kind of impunity that the people who own the hydroelectric company, who inevitably were accused, convicted, and sentenced to, you know, years in prison for plotting her
Yeah.
murder, are so emboldened that in spite of all the international attention on Berta, they still conspired to kill her and killed her. So
Yeah, that's one of those moments where, it adds so much gravitas to the situation because you can't believe that somebody would have um, uh, such unbridled, kind of ego that they could just get away with anything. I guess that raises a question. When you had started developing these relationships, do you think when they chose to participate in the film, did they do it because they felt like it would help get their voice out further? Would it, was it kind of a shield of protection in some way, in the sense that allowed them to kind of, take greater risks because there was a spotlight on them, or does a greater risk come with it because their enemies see that they're kind of agitating and bringing outsiders? Like, yeah, what's the kind of like, what are some of the kind of balance of power there when somebody decides to be in a film?
Yeah, I mean, in reality, right, these people are people who are out there on the front line, and they're in front of the media, and they're in front of the opposition all the time. So in terms of being at risk, they put themselves at risk. They choose to be in a position where they're speaking truth to power, and as such, right, their lives are put at risk. And when we talked with them about the idea of making the film, they said, well, no one else is telling our story, and you guys are really talented storytellers. And so they were completely up for doing that, right? There was kind of no question. But again, they hadn't been part of a film before. They'd been around the media, but they're accustomed to the news media, where a camera person, oftentimes just the camera person alone, shows up, right? Puts them up against the wall. They have a bright light on the top of their camera. They ask them 3 questions and they're gone. They film them around their house for 10 or 20 minutes. And the fact that we would want to continue to shoot over the course of years and shoot scene after scene and interview after interview, that was the part that was sort of confounding to our protagonists at time. And that was the part that we had to explain, that in order to show your life in full and to show the trajectory of the battle and your success story, and the ups and downs, right? It is like, an S wave. We need to keep filming these scenes, and that was difficult at times. I mean, that didn't always go down well. And so, what we learned was, I mean, what I learned a long time ago working with other filmmakers, right? I worked with Toby McLeod, who's a local filmmaker, on films that he's made about Native American people and indigenous cultures around the world. And what I learned working with Toby was what's important is showing up and hanging out, not showing up and having to film every moment, not insinuating yourself into every scene, just being there and choosing wisely, right? Knowing that you're going to be filming over years, you're going to film much more than you'll ever use in the final film. As a filmmaker, you need all that material for the gems, but you also know you won't use everything. So if in fact you miss some great moment, but you were being respectful and you were being part of the family or part of the community or part of the gathering, instead of taking, like I learned from a Navajo the idea that working on a film for Italian television, that outsiders tend to come into, non-Indigenous people tend to come into Indigenous culture saying they want to help and taking things, procuring things, and then going away. And we often never hear back from them. So I went out of my
different than mining companies.
Exactly, right? Except no, but we're different. We're really trying to help. And so I learned to try to not always be taking something, but to try to be giving something, right? And so I think that's the essence and the key to establishing those relationships and that trust. And that's what makes it work. And it enriches us because we have a deeper connection and we learn more about the culture and the people. And so it's,
It makes a much more powerful film, as we see,
and then there's that too. Yeah.
So, I know that, you've been kind of traveling around with the film over the last year and have got a chance to share it with different audiences and things. how have the people or families in the film, have they had a chance to see it, and what their reactions been, and what's also happened since you finished editing?
I mean, I think one of the most rewarding things that's happened with the film is that the protagonists in the film and their families have all seen the film. We brought two of the three to the world premiere at the Mill Valley Film Festival, and everyone said, and we showed, to be honest, we showed everyone the rough cut, because a lot of filmmakers would say, oh, you can't show the subjects of your film the rough cut. I mean, that's your choice. You make the film that you want to make, and you're setting yourself up for trouble. But part of that relationship and part of that understanding was, I think I owed it to them. We owed it to them to show them the film before we put it out to the world. Number one, because it is showing them warts and all, and I wanted them to be aware of what it was that we were doing. But also, if in case we got something wrong, what if we did get something wrong? Or what if there was something that was really sensitive? I mean, as an example, we had filmed something with Alberto Cudamil around a ceremony, and we had permission to film it. And then later it was decided by the community that they didn't want us to use it. So even though we'd been given permission, and we honored that, and we were never not going to honor that. So I felt that that was really important. So the most rewarding thing is that everyone involved in front of the camera told us that you got it right and you did a great job, and they really admire us. They also said part of getting it right is it's painful for us to experience it. Part of what makes the film so powerful emotionally is that you did capture what it's like, and we're not sure how many times we can relive that. And their families even more so, right? Even more difficult for the families than for them. As we've traveled with the film around the world, we always thought, going back to John Antonelli saying, put together three stories and you have a microcosm for what's happening around the world. The film resonates with people everywhere where we've screened it. I mean, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in South America, in the Caribbean, there's a universal pull to these stories. There's a universal feel, and the number of people who have told us from other countries, yes, the locations, the situations are different, but these are our stories. This is the same thing. This is what's happening to us, and we want to take this film and show it in our communities. So that has been so rewarding, I have to say.
Well, very cool. As things wrap up, what are ways that folks can continue to follow your work and also just kind of help spread word about the film?
Yeah, please go to our website. It's www.waterforlife.film, and sign up for our newsletter. Follow us on social media. We're on all the major social media channels, and pay attention to what we're doing. Share it with friends. Yeah, that's the best thing that we can ask you to do. And if you're well-heeled and want to make donations, each of our three protagonists have organizations who you can contribute towards, and they need our help to keep their work going.
And I'll just kind of second that. Do subscribe to Will's newsletter and check out the social media feed. He does a really great job of kind of updating us about the different characters' journeys and what's happening there. So thanks again for being part of the festival, Will, and have a great day.
Thanks, Chris. It's an honor to be part of the festival. Thanks for including us. We really appreciate it.
Most definitely.
Take care.